Jerusalem at night. The city is quiet. Torches flicker along the stone walls. The streets are empty. And through the shadows, a single figure moves. Careful and deliberate, making sure no one sees. He is not a criminal. He is not running from the law. He is the law, one of the most powerful religious minds in the entire nation. A member of the highest governing body in Israel, slipping through the darkness to find one man, a carpenter from Galilee. He has questions he cannot ask in public, questions that could cost him everything if the wrong person heard them. So he comes at night. What happens next in that quiet room between those two men would become one of the most quoted conversations in all of human history. Billions of people have heard the words that came out of it, but almost none of them know what those words actually meant, because buried inside that conversation is a Greek word, a single word, that carries two meanings at the same time. And the most educated man in the room heard the wrong one. He spent the rest of his life trying to understand what he missed. And once you see it, you will never hear the phrase "born again" the same way again. His name is Nicodemus, and he is not someone you would expect to come looking for answers. He is a Pharisee, one of the most educated and most respected men in the entire Jewish religious world. He is a ruler of the Jews, a member of the Sanhedrin, the 71-man governing body that held authority over Jewish religious and civil life. John calls him something even more specific: the teacher of Israel. Not a teacher, but the teacher. This is a man who has memorized the Torah, who has spent his entire life in the text, who carries more theological knowledge than most people accumulate in 10 lifetimes. He had been climbing his whole life, and he had climbed higher than almost anyone, and he comes to Jesus at night. Now here is what you need to know about the Gospel of John. From the very first chapter, John has been building a contrast between two things, light and darkness. In him was life, John writes, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. This is not just decorative language. Throughout the Gospel of John, darkness and night are used to signal a specific spiritual condition, not necessarily evil, but the absence of understanding the state of a mind that has not yet seen clearly. So when John tells us Nicodemus came by night, he is telling us more than a time of day. He is telling us something about where this man is. He has all the knowledge. He does not yet have the light. Nicodemus opens with a careful, respectful greeting. "Rabbi, we know you are a teacher who has come from God." No one could perform the signs you are doing if God were not with him. He is acknowledging something. Something in him recognizes that Jesus is real, but he has not quite formed the question yet. And before he can, Jesus answers it. Before we get to what Jesus actually said, you need to understand something first. Because without this, the Greek word will not land the way it is supposed to think about the most fundamental things about you. Your blood type, your eye color, your DNA. You did not choose any of that before you had a single thought. Before you made a single decision, your nature was already determined, not by your effort, but by your birth. Now think about what you can actually change about yourself. You can change your behavior. That is called discipline. You can change your habits. That is called willpower. You can change your religion. That is called reformation. And all of those things are real. They matter. But here is what none of them can touch: your nature. And here is the thing about birth. The thing Jesus is about to point straight at in this conversation. You did not do anything to be born. You did not earn your first breath. You did not push yourself into existence. Life came to you from completely outside you, and you received it. That is the only kind of birth there has ever been. Nobody births themselves. Now take that understanding into the room with Nicodemus, the most disciplined, most dedicated, most religiously excellent man in Jerusalem. A man who has spent his entire life perfecting his behavior, mastering the law, studying the text, and maintaining his standing before God. He has done everything right. He has climbed higher than anyone thought possible. And here is the thing about ladders. You can spend your whole life climbing one and still end up in the wrong place. And Jesus looks at him and says the one thing his entire framework never prepared him for. What you need is not better behavior. It is a different nature. And you cannot give that to yourself. It has to come from above. Jesus says this: "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless a man is born anōthen, he cannot see the kingdom of God." Anōthen, that is the word, and here is what almost nobody explains in Greek. Anōthen carries two meanings simultaneously. It can mean again a second time once more. It can also mean from above, from heaven, from a higher source entirely. Both meanings are real. Both were well known to anyone who spoke Greek in the first century. And Jesus chose this exact word deliberately, with full knowledge of both meanings, because the conversation that follows depends entirely on which meaning Nicodemus heard. Nicodemus heard again. His response makes that completely clear. How can a man be born when he is old? Can he enter his mother's womb a second time and be born? That phrase, a second time, is the Greek word deuteron. Nicodemus is translating for us. He heard anōthen, and his mind went immediately to repetition, to doing it over to a second physical birth. He pictured climbing the same ladder starting from the bottom. One more attempt, but this time more carefully with everything he had learned the first time. And he followed that meaning to its logical conclusion, which is impossible. He is not being obtuse. He is not being deliberately difficult. He is the most precise theological mind in the room. He heard a word. He identified a valid meaning. He traced it to its end, and he found the end of it absurd. So he looks back at Jesus waiting. But notice what Jesus does not do. He does not say, "No, you misunderstood. I meant from above, not again." He does not correct the translation directly. He goes deeper. "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born of water and the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the Spirit is spirit." He is not explaining anōthen away. He is revealing what the second meaning actually looks like. Born from above means born of the Spirit. A birth that does not originate in you. A birth that comes from somewhere and someone entirely outside your effort, your will, your religious achievement. Now, before we go further, what does water have to do with this? Hundreds of years before this conversation, a prophet named Ezekiel wrote this. "I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you shall be clean. I will give you a new heart, and put a new spirit in you." Water and spirit together as one act of God's renewal. Not something you do, but something done to you. Nicodemus, as the teacher of Israel, had this passage memorized. And Jesus is looking directly at him, saying, "This is what I am talking about." The promise Ezekiel described, the cleansing, the new heart the Spirit placed within, that is what born from above looks like. Not a ritual you perform, but a renewal God initiates. But Jesus is not finished, because in the same conversation he does it again. Same move, different word. John chapter 3 verse 8, "The pneuma blows where it wishes. You hear its sound, but you do not know where it comes from or where it goes. So it is with everyone born of the pneuma." Pneuma in Greek means wind, and it also means spirit, both simultaneously in the same breath. Jesus opens the sentence with the word and closes it with the same word, wind and spirit, one word bookending the same thought. The first pneuma, he is describing the natural phenomenon, the wind that moves through the air, that you can hear, that you can feel on your skin, but that you cannot control or predict or command. The second pneuma, he is describing the Spirit of God. Same word, two realities layered on purpose. And here is the single point both words anōthen and pneuma are making together. The wind does not ask your permission. You do not schedule it. You do not earn it. You do not manufacture it through effort or discipline or religious performance. You can open a window toward it, but it moves entirely on its own terms. That is what the Spirit is like. You can hear it. You can experience what it does. You can come toward it, but you cannot produce it. And Nicodemus, sitting across from Jesus, is hearing that the most important transformation of his soul is completely outside his own production. The man who had built an entire life on what he could achieve through effort is being told the very thing you need most cannot be achieved, only received. You can hear the wind, Jesus says, but you did not make it blow. But there is still a question hanging in the air. Nicodemus almost forms it before the conversation moves on. How can these things be? If the birth from above cannot be manufactured, if the wind moves entirely on its own terms, if you cannot climb your way into the kingdom, then how does heaven's life reach someone down here who cannot get up to it? Jesus answers that, and he answers it with a story Nicodemus had memorized since he was a boy. As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believes in him may have eternal life. Nicodemus knew this story in his bones. Out in the desert, Israel was dying. Venomous snakes moving through the camp, people dropping, and God's instruction to Moses was almost offensive in its simplicity. Make a bronze image of the very thing, killing them, lift it on a pole, and anyone who looks at it lives. No climbing, no earning the right, no ladder to scale. A dying person only had to turn their head. Jesus is pointing at that story and pointing at himself in the same breath. He is the one who came from above. And he is the one who will be lifted up so that the life of heaven can reach people who could never ascend to it on their own. This is the answer to Nicodemus and his wall. He kept trying to calculate how a person climbs back to God, how you do it again better this time. And Jesus says, stop climbing, start looking. The birth from above does not come from your effort to go up. It comes from God's decision to come down. Heaven did not wait for us to ascend the ladder. Heaven descended the ladder to us. Right here, stop for a second. Has anyone ever shown you John chapter 3 this way? Two words, two double meanings in the same conversation. Drop a comment right now, I want to know. And if this kind of deep dive past the English into the original language is what you have been looking for, then subscribe. This is what we do here every week. Let us finish this because the best part is still coming. Let us step back and see what Jesus has actually said to this man. He has not told Nicodemus to be more religious. He has not given him a list of things to perform. He has told him that what he needs most cannot come from any of those places. It has to come from above. John actually prepares us for this moment as early as chapter 1. In the prologue before Nicodemus ever appears, John writes that those who received Jesus were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. Born of God. The Greek word is geno, to be born, to be brought into existence. The same word that runs through the whole Nicodemus conversation. John chapter 1 tells us this birth is not of blood, meaning it does not come from your ancestry or heritage. Not of the will of the flesh, meaning it does not come from natural human drive. Not of the will of man, meaning it does not come from religious ambition or human decision, but of God from above. Remember the analogy. You did not do anything to be born physically. Life came to you from outside you entirely. Born from above works the same way. You do not produce it, you receive it. A child does not earn its place in the family by being born well. It belongs because it was born at all. The love came before the first breath. The belonging came before the first choice. And this is why Nicodemus matters so much as the recipient of this teaching. He is not a pagan. He is not a man who ignored God. He is the most dedicated and most educated God pursuer in Jerusalem. And Jesus is looking directly at him and saying, everything you have built, everything you have achieved through knowledge and discipline and religious excellence is behavior. What you need is a nature change. And nature only changes through birth. The question is, what did Nicodemus do with that? John does not tell us, not yet. He lets Nicodemus walk back out into the night, and then he waits. Nicodemus appears in the Gospel of John 3 times. 3 scenes spread across the entire book. And if you read them, in order you watch a man slowly and quietly making his way from darkness into light. The first scene is John chapter 3, we have been in it. Night questions, and the double meaning he missed. He walks away with more than he came with, but still in the dark. The second scene is John chapter 7. The Sanhedrin, the governing body Nicodemus belongs to, has been trying to arrest Jesus. They sent officers to seize him. The officers came back empty-handed. No one ever spoke the way this man speaks, they say. The Pharisees are furious. Have any of the rulers or Pharisees believed in him? No. They mock anyone who might be drawn to Jesus. And then one voice in the room speaks up Nicodemus. Does our law judge a man without first giving him a hearing and learning what he does? That is it. That is all he says. He does not declare Jesus the Messiah. He does not confess faith openly. He asks a procedural legal question, but it is enough to turn every head in the room toward him. Are you from Galilee too? They snap back. He says nothing more. But notice what happened in that room. The man who came to Jesus under cover of night's secret, cautious and alone, is now standing up in the Sanhedrin in public, creating space for Jesus to receive a fair hearing. It is a small step, careful and still guarded, but he is moving from the darkness of John chapter 3 towards something. The third scene is John chapter 19 at the cross. Jesus has been crucified. The disciples have scattered. Most of them are in hiding. Joseph of Arimathea, a secret disciple, goes to Pilate and asks for the body of Jesus, and Nicodemus comes with him. He brings a mixture of myrrh and aloes, 100 litras, 100 Roman pounds, approximately 75 pounds of burial spices. This is not a symbolic gesture. This is not a quiet, private expression of respect. 75 pounds of myrrh and aloes is an extravagant and costly preparation. It is the kind of burial offering prepared for royalty. It required planning. It required resources. It required showing up openly and visibly after the execution of a man the Sanhedrin had just condemned. This is not a man staying in the shadows. And John, who has been so precise about light and darkness throughout this entire gospel, makes absolutely sure we know who this is. He does not just say Nicodemus came. He writes Nicodemus, who had come to Jesus by night, came. He uses the word night one final time because he wants you to feel the arc. The man who came to Jesus in darkness, cautious, hidden, and unable to hear the second meaning of the first word Jesus spoke, is now standing at the tomb openly, visibly, and no longer hiding, holding 75 pounds of spices, honoring a crucified man publicly, at personal cost, at professional risk. After the crowd dispersed and the disciples fled and the world decided it was over. That is what born from above looks like when it takes hold in a life. Not always a dramatic altar moment. Not a single scene where everything snaps into focus. Sometimes it looks like a man showing up at the cross when everybody else already went home. Anōthen from above. The wind moved. The birth happened. Not through the effort or knowledge or religious achievement of Nicodemus. Through something that came from outside him entirely. And John shows it to us across 3 scenes across an entire gospel because that is often how it actually happens. So here is the question underneath all of this. When you say born again, what do you mean? Is it a moment you had years ago, a prayer you prayed, a feeling you once felt at an altar, or is it a direction you are still moving? Because Nicodemus did not have a single clean conversion moment that John records for us. What John records is a journey night, then a cautious question in a courtroom, then finally 75 pounds of spices at a public tomb, moving from darkness into light slowly, steadily, and at real cost. The wind blows where it wishes. You cannot schedule it. You cannot manufacture it. But Nicodemus kept coming back to the question, to the conversation, to the one who said he was the light of the world. And somewhere between John chapter 3 and John chapter 19, the wind moved. Hear this once. If you have been carrying faith like a weight on your back, convinced that one more rung, one more effort, one more year of getting it right will finally tip the balance. The problem was never that you were not climbing hard enough. You cannot climb your way into a birth. And if you are not sure anything has actually changed in you, the question is not whether you felt something in a single moment. The question is whether you are still moving, still coming toward Jesus, even in the dark, even with questions you cannot fully form. That is what Nicodemus did. And John gave him 3 scenes in his gospel, not one. Because the born from above life does not always look like a lightning bolt from the sky. Sometimes it looks like a long, slow walk. From night toward morning, from hiding to a small step to showing up at the tomb with everything you have. Nicodemus walked back out into the night at the end of John chapter 3 with a question still forming in his mind. He did not have it together. He did not fully understand. He missed the second meaning of the first word. But he came, and Jesus met him there in the dark, in the confusion, in the middle of a conversation he did not fully follow, and told him the truth anyway. The wind blows where it wishes. You did not make it blow, but you can come. You can keep coming back. You can bring your questions, your incomplete understanding, your slow and stumbling movement toward the light. That is not a failure of faith. That is faith. The faith of Nicodemus, shown in 3 scenes across one gospel, from night to a question in a courtroom to 75 pounds of spices at a tomb. Born again, born from above, anōthen, both meanings at once. Born again was never wrong. It just was never the whole of it. The word held a second door the entire time, and that door opens upward. A second chance and a birth from somewhere higher than you could reach on your own. That is the word Jesus chose not by accident. And it is still being offered to anyone who comes, even in the dark, even tonight.